I like trains.
On this cold, dreary, and damp Thursday, December morning, I decided to do something I had never done before, which was to chase a train. A few days prior to the 30th, I got the heads up that the Maryland Midland would be running a train that only runs on occasion, the Union Bridge to Taneytown Local, or UBTT for short. The UBTT, which is a fertilizer and propane train, is an as-needed train on the Maryland Midland and typically operates once a month. Of course, this is very different from the UBHF, UBST, and UBEG, as they all run on a weekly basis, usually every day of the week. The power used for the UBTT is much more specific than the other trains on the Maryland Midland that typically use the SD40M-2s. The UBTT is actually required to use Jeeps for power through the entire Taneytown line from Kemar to Taneytown. While they could technically use SD40s until Kemar, it is much more efficient for them to use the GP locomotives for the entire journey. Another thing about the UBTT's power is that one locomotive is used on each end of the train rather than two on one side. They do this because the train dead ends in Taneytown, and the crew would rather have a locomotive pulling the train up front the entire time rather than having to push the train backwards for part of the trip, which honestly makes sense. The two things I just described were the ultimate reasons why I decided to not only catch this train, but also chase it. The UBTT begins its journey at Maryland Midland's headquarters, Union Bridge, just as every other train would. From there, it heads west to Kemar, similar to the UBHF and UBST, but instead of continuing west, the UBTT spins its train on the Y and proceeds northbound. Now the UBST also uses the Y, but it instead heads southbound to Woodsboro to load its cars with stone. Anyways, as the UBTT nears Taneytown, it stops at the Kemar fertilizer plant to drop off a few of its tankers loaded with fertilizer, as well as the other cars in the consist that are not needed for Taneytown. Once those cars are dropped off, the UBTT continues all the way to Taneytown, entering the Ferrellgas propane facility. There, it swaps out a loaded tanker for an empty tanker sitting in the sidetrack. Eventually, a truck will empty the propane from the swapped-out tanker and transport it to companies who use and sell Ferrellgas propane. When this maneuver is complete, the UBTT leaves Taneytown southbound on its way back to Union Bridge. Now, this is by no means a straight run back to the headquarters, as once again, the UBTT has to stop at the Kemar fertilizer plant to pick up the cars it dropped off, and later respin its train on the Y before officially making its way east to its final destination. Since I was available this whole day and had nothing else planned, I ended up chasing this train for its entire journey. My chase of the UBTT began in Union Bridge at the North Main Street crossing. I was not alone here either, as a few people, including the train seekers on YouTube, met up with me to catch this. Be sure to subscribe to their channel if you haven't yet. As I patiently waited for the locomotives to connect to the consist, I explored around the abandoned station, which is now Western Maryland Historical Society. There, I found a pair of Western Maryland Maintenance of Way vehicles, an old Western Maryland signal, Maryland Midland's official headquarters building, and a few old Western Maryland cars, including a caboose, coal hopper, boxcar, and troop car. Finally, around 8:45 a.m., I heard a narrow font K5LA horn coming from the locomotive's chops, which meant that the power was ready to hook up to each side of the UBTT's consist. Pictured right there on the right is the entire 7-car consist for the UBTT, and in the middle is the UBHF cement hoppers. Next, I spotted the power coming out of the shops, and to no surprise, it was the GP38-3 pair, 2060 and 2061. I did not expect York Rail 1600, the GP16, to be in this train, but it would have been extremely cool if it ended up being used on it. Fortunately, I have seen 1600 on the UBHF before, back in June of 2021. Anyways, 2061 and 2060 broke apart from each other and connected to each end of the train. 2061 on the east end and 2060 on the west end. This meant that 2060 would lead the UBTT out of Union Bridge, so it was awesome to see the Heritage Unit in the original Maryland Midland paint scheme leading a train once again. Immediately after the UBTT departed Union Bridge, I got back in the car and drove to the Middleburg Road crossing in Kemar to catch the train heading northbound, and the chase was officially on. Now this was after the train had spun around the Y, so 2061 led the train to Taneytown, and 2060 was the rear pusher. Once the train passed me a second time, I headed to the unprotected crossing at Crouse Road. There, I met up with Maryland Area Railfan on YouTube. Big thanks to him for helping me with this chase. Anyways, I knew I had time before the train would pass us, because it needed to work Kemar fertilizer first. When it was finished, the UBTT passed us with only 3 cars in the consist this time, as the other 4 cars were dropped off. The consist to Taneytown included 2 hopper cars on each end and a tanker car in the middle. I was told that the hoppers acted as buffers, similar to ethanol trains on Class 1 railroads. Once the train crossed Crouse Road, I followed Maryland Area Railfan to Taneytown and the brand new neighborhood development. This was quite a neat location to watch the train pass and enter the Ferrellgas plant. After the UBTT slowly passed, we headed to the facility to watch the train swap out the loaded tanker for the empty tanker. We could not stay long though, as we wanted to catch the train passing Meades Avenue. For the next part of our journey, the Heritage Unit 2060 would lead the train until reaching the Y. Shortly after we arrived at the crossing, the crew hopped on board and the UBTT officially proceeded south. We later went back to Crouse Road to catch the train, as we wanted to get a nice straightaway shot of 2060. Then we went back to Middleburg Road, and luckily for us, 2060 and 2061 were in Notch 8 when they passed by. At this point, the train had picked up the other 4 cars from Kemar Fertilizer. Our final location on this chase was in Middleburg at the Johnsville Road crossing, which was also unprotected. This was a nice location, especially with the old Middleburg sign, the siding with signals, and the farm right next to the tracks. I originally wanted to finish my journey in Union Bridge, but I and Maryland Area Railfan wanted to change things up a bit. I technically could have headed straight to Union Bridge after this, but I would have been rushed and would have ran the risk of missing it, so it just wasn't worth it. Also, this crossing was right after the Y, so 2061 led the train through this location. This was quite a successful catch, and I would absolutely do this again, or something similar if I have the time. Now with this preview aside, enjoy my complete chase of the Maryland Midland UBTT from Union Bridge to Taneytown and back, featuring the 2 EMD GP38-3s, 2060 and 2061. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video.
You ever catch any Norfolk Southern Heritage units?
Nope.
I've only seen a couple. We've seen the Montague and we've seen the Virginia.
I've seen 2 of them as trailers, but never as a leader.
Okay.
Is it?
We sometimes go to Sharpsburg and we'll go to Hagerstown and sit in that main line and just wait for them. But
Okay.
there's an app on your phone you can watch.
Yeah.
I try to use that, but not always correct. But We've been to Harrisburg a couple times and tried to catch him with his right left.
I see it.
They've done a lot of work
Oh,
up in the
crap, I can
Harrisburg
see
area
it.
since the last time I was up there.
Yep.
say you're excited for the chase back. Yeah, we'll probably do here, Crouseville, and that like the same tree.